I love the Final Destination franchise. I love the idea of death being a bit of a sore loser, a bit of a petty bitch. And when he's getting his revenge, he loves to play with his food whilst indulging his perverse Rube Goldberg fetish. Now that is a villain. Better yet, it's mostly just wind and villainizing ordinary day-to-day objects and asking, what can we transform into a deadly Rube Goldberg machine of death? Most sequels suffer from the lazy rehash of the original film, but Final Destination might be the perfect franchise and vehicle for sequels just doing the same thing again and again and again. Every film opens with a massive set piece of carnage that traumatized an entire generation. It ruined flying planes, riding roller coasters, and most infamously, driving behind trucks carrying logs. But let's be real, it was mostly driving behind trucks carrying logs. I'll still fly in a plane if I have to, but if I see even one thin piece of wood strapped to the back of a truck, I am getting the fuck out of there. So today I'll be ranking and reviewing all 6 Final Destination films. Spoilers for the first 5 films, and I won't do any spoilers in my ranking and reviewing of Bloodlines since that just came out this week. Obviously, like every ranking video, this is my subjective opinion, and I would love to hear your subjective opinion and rankings in the comments. So take a seat, put up your feet, or continue sitting on the toilet, and grab a beer or coffee or that miscellaneous item sitting next to you precariously that could be your death, and let's get our rank on. Sounds gross. Don't know why I said that. Number 6, The Final Destination, aka Final Destination 4, aka not the Final Destination, aka Final Destination 4 3D. By the 4th film in this franchise, we are here for one thing and one thing only, and that is not horrendous looking CGI blood and gore, or maybe even worse, 3D. This film is one of the most aggressively consistent and overused 3D films I've ever seen. If something moves in this film, you better believe it's coming at the screen, at your face. I've always hated 3D. It's ruined such classics like Pirates of the Caribbean 4, My Bloody Valentine 3D, and a third example. But I think it's particularly bad when it's relied upon and utilized with CGI instead of all the fantastic, tangible, practical effects, and it completely undermines all of the practical stuff that is going on in this film, like the crash, or the concept of some of the kills in this film, because they are really inventive and fun at times, but all of that is completely buried or forgotten about because of the embarrassing CG 3D. Now don't get me wrong, I love CGI as much as the next guy, but there are 2 places in film I don't think CGI works. 1, orcs, goblins, and urukai, and 2, CGI blood and gore in horror. The acting in this film is bad. The dialogue, somehow worse. These films have almost no downtime in between death set pieces, and yet because the characters in this are so unlikable and uninteresting, even at a mercifully 81 minutes long, these moments in between the death set pieces drag. Unfortunately, this is the worst and only bad Final Destination film. This film sucks ass. But cheeky little silver lining, this film sucks ass. A man gets his guts sucked out of him via his asshole by a pool filter. Now that is cinema. Also, I have to give this film brownie points for being the 4th out of 6 films, but boldly calling itself The Final Destination. You're not an iconic horror franchise until one of your films in the middle of the series boldly claims to be the last film. Better yet, nothing in this film whatsoever warrants it being the final installment or conclusion of this franchise. It's simply just another film. Number 5, Final Destination 5. For 14 years, this was our Final Destination film. And what a return to form it was compared to 4. Unfortunately, it does still suffer here or there from a bit of CGI and 3D effects, but I feel like compared to 4, to a far less egregious effect. Now, just to be crystal clear, just to be clear rivers about this whole situation, Final Destination 5 is only 5th because one of the films has to draw the short straw. I genuinely think 5 of the 6 films are great and I have a lot of fun with them. All of them except for 4, I kind of love. Unfortunately, this film was just sitting in the wrong position on the roller coaster. Overall, this film just has a far better and more likable cast, so all the downtime between the death set pieces is far more enjoyable. The death set pieces in this film are also back to that classic Rube Goldberg situation where a million different things are happening and it builds such exciting and horrible suspense and tension. The highlight obviously being the gymnastics scene, which is one of the all-time great Final Destination kills. We also get Tony Todd back after 2 films' absence, and he's doing some of his best work in this one, an absolute delight. The opening bridge sequence is amazing. I really don't mind it being super visual effects heavy. Some of the shots are shockingly great. I particularly love the oil spill, tar spill or whatever it is, going over that guy from Anchorman. Horrific stuff. Absolutely love that opening scene, one of my favorites. It also decides to add some really interesting lore and mythology into the series with the idea of being able to kill someone and take their years. I think it adds a lot by adding an extra kind of villain into the mix, and whilst maybe they could have done a little bit more with it, I think it's a really cool and interesting idea. I think one of the only things that really disappoints me in this film is the main character, that guy from Heroes Season 2, is a chef, and they tease a bunch of really fun restaurant death set pieces, but they never commit and give us one big extended restaurant kitchen death scene, and I just think that's a wasted opportunity. The biggest and most exciting thing this film has going for it is the way it concludes its story and giving the film and the franchise, at that point being the final one, a really nice closed loop situation. Every film ends with a couple of the heroes thinking they've outsmarted or survived death, and then
6 to 8 weeks later,
it turns out they haven't and they all die. And this time that end sequence is set on a plane. That plane from the first film. It's such a fun way to tie the franchise together in such a simple way, and it's probably the only example of a film being like, surprise bitch, it's a prequel, that like actually works. Speaking of planes, number 4, Final Destination. Great. Now I'm afraid of flying, standing on sidewalks, gas stoves, and worst of all, the horrifying prospect of how many horror franchises we have missed out on that are now just random episodes of X-Files that nobody remembers. It was originally going to be an X-Files episode, but then some mad genius was like, no, this is too good. Let's make it a franchise, baby. Now don't get me wrong, I love the X-Files, but making this a horror film instead is just a pure stroke of cinematic genius. Whilst I still have a lot of fun with this film, there's a couple of things that I personally don't love. Mostly it comes down to the tone. I feel like this film takes itself very seriously, and I think this is probably going to be the case where people who think this is the best one love the tone and probably think the rest of the franchise potentially gets a little bit silly and cartoonish, whereas I kind of prefer that. I think the premise in general of the Rube Goldberg situation of different things hitting different things and falling over, and you think something's going to kill them, but it's something over here instead, and it's all just silly, gleeful madness. That's what I prefer in this franchise, so I actually find this one far too self-serious, far less fun, and far too much, oh no, I'm cursed. This film obviously gets massive bonus points for just being the film that kicked it all off and doing a lot of things right. But I just kind of feel like a lot of the death sequences aren't that interesting. I don't really connect with any of the characters that much. Stifler is wildly miscast. Outside of the one death sequence with the teacher, I just feel like they're not very interesting or creative kills. This film was a lot of people screaming at everybody else being like, you're gonna die, while they stand in the most telegraphed I'm about to die position possible. This film is still a bit of fun, and it's very interesting to see where it all kicked off. Also, the person who decided to change the film from Flight 180 to Final Destination is a genius. Can you imagine if this franchise was the Flight 180 franchise? What would the next film be? Flight 181? Number 3, Final Destination Bloodlines. This film is absolutely fantastic. It nails the one thing you want to see in a Final Destination film, and that is the extended death sequences. Its use of tension, suspense, and playing with expectations in all these different ways is so exciting and fun and squirmish and terrifying, and I just had such an absolute delight watching this film. This film gleefully relishes in the death set pieces. It takes some massive wild swings in the lore and mythology and nails the main cast by doing something new in the Final Destination franchise and focusing on family. I care about the family and the cast and the plot in a way that I've never cared in any of the other films. It somehow manages to be a Final Destination film, but also kind of be a sneaky A24 film in that the death curse is also a metaphor for hereditary mental illness. It is the funniest of the franchise with some amazing but very dark humor. And it somehow manages to geniusly tie the entire franchise together. This is blockbuster horror at its best, and I just had so much fun watching it in the cinema. Will it on a rewatch lose some of the effect that it had by not seeing it in a cinema with a crowd? Potentially. I do think this film, like 4 and 5, kind of suffers from the over-reliance on CGI in relation to its blood and gore, and there were parts that I found quite frustrating just because I feel like it would be an almost perfect film had it decided to be a little bit more practical. That being said, I think this film does so much so right that at this point, I am willing to forgive it, but I am a little fearful of rewatches, and will that kind of annoy me more, and will it drop a little bit? Just because I think the tangible practicality of the kills, in particularly the first 3, is one of the amazing draws of this franchise. Also, Tony Todd has a beautiful swan song cameo in this film that is surprisingly heartwarming and incredibly powerful. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on Bloodlines, I've got a review of the movie, link in the thingy or whatever. Number 2, Flight 181. Now, this is probably the most controversial one. A lot of people think this is the peak of the franchise, and whilst I definitely agree that it is the most iconic of the Final Destination films, I don't think it's the best. The opening premonition car crash in this film is the peak of the franchise, and it's easily the most horrifying, traumatic part of this entire series. There is something so terrifying about this opening sequence, and not just the idea of it, but the execution of it is astonishing. It is so horrific. It's the best looking scene in the entire franchise. It is so tangible and real and brutal. I am overwhelmed by it every single time I see it. It's the best scene out of maybe any horror opening to a movie, save, I don't know, 4 of the 6 Scream films. Halloween's pretty good too. I don't know. I'm thinking about a lot of horror opening. Let's say I'm gonna lowball it and say it's in the top 10. Also, shout out to the screenwriter of this film for originally wanting to kill a 6-year-old with that giant plate of glass. That is the kind of psycho energy that we want from our horror screenwriters. 2 is an improvement over 1 in every conceivable way. So much so that I kind of feel like it should be talked about like Empire Strikes Back or Godfather Part 2. Less sadness, more creative kills, and it really leans into death's fetish with Rube Goldberg. I love the connection between this cast and original recipe Final Destination. It's a simple yet effective way to connect the franchise. Honestly, I feel like this does almost everything you could want in a Final Destination film, and whilst I think the characters are a significant improvement and I like them a lot more than in 1, but I don't think the characters are nearly as interesting or as funny as number 1, Final Destination 3. I thought Tintin had the best transitions in cinematic history, but it turns out it's Final Destination 3. The smash cut from the tanning beds on fire to the coffins, now that is cinema. This film is the best in the franchise. I absolutely love it so very much. I love so much about this film, but I think the thing that truly elevates it is that Mary Elizabeth Winstead is a sensational actress. She's an incredible scream queen, and she carries this film on her shoulders, and every other performance in this film kind of lifts and meets her in a way that I just don't think they do in any of the other films. Even 6, which I think has a more interesting plot and kind of focuses on the character side of things way more, I just think 3 nails what it sets out to do, and that is to be a pure teen high school slasher style film. I just love this film's super high school vibes. The roller coaster carnival at the start, the carnival with the fireworks at the end. Every single character in this film that gets a big death set piece sequence is just this really funny parody caricature of high school cliches and tropes. We got the cheerleaders, we got the jocks, we got the emos, and most importantly, we got a Shermanator. I just absolutely love it. This one definitely has the most nostalgia for me. I don't think I truly realized that until I was re-watching them all, but I was like, oh, this is the one I watched way more than any of the others. So maybe there's something to do with that as to why I think it's the best one, but on a rewatch, I still think this has the most interesting things going on. I personally love the death set pieces that are longer and more extended and more just crazy, ridiculous stuff going on and building up that tension before the ridiculous explosion of gore. This has two of my favorite kills in it, just in that they are such hilarious parodies of these high school cliches, but are also just so ridiculously over the top and funny and absurd. That being the tanning bed sequence with the cheerleaders, and then the jocks just being big muscle bros working out like absolute maniacs, and eventually his head explodes everywhere, and it's so wildly stupid and dumb, and I just love it so very much. I also absolutely love the addition of the photos and kind of using them as clues to kind of figure out who's next on Death's list. I don't know, I just think that's a super fun way to kind of carry us through this story. But the real reason I love this film is Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I remember when she suddenly exploded and was just in everything all of a sudden. I just was always like, I can't believe the chick from Final Destination is now awesome and big and huge. It's so exciting. And so I was a little curious when rewatching it, would she be good in this film? Is it the reason this film is better? Or did I just maybe have a bit of a teenage crush on her? And rewatching it, I'm delighted to answer both. The answer is both. Another thing that Final Destination 3 has on top of the others is that if you have the DVD of the third film, you get a choose your own adventure type, pick the death or try and get them to survive. It's crazy, like new deaths. Like the tanning bed sequence, you can make it so one of them gets out of the tanning bed. It's awesome. I mean, it completely ruins the greatest transition in cinematic history, but apart from that, it's awesome. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment below. I would love to know what is your rankings of the Final Destination films.